Saturday, August 8th, 1970. Lolita, a 6-year-old killer whale, and her family pod were swimming through their home waters, the Salish Sea. They were on their way to Puget Sound to a routine reunion of the Salish Sea orcapods, called a superpod. They were to gather, mingle, eat, and play, rekindle old friendships, and create new memories too. But Lolita and her family never made it to the reunion. Tragedy struck at the hands of man. There was violence, there was suffering, there were lives lost. Lolita's freedom was stolen that day. This is her story. Orcinus orca, or killer whales as they're commonly known, aren't actually whales at all. They're actually the largest member of the dolphin family, Delphinidae. Other species of Delphinidae include bottlenose dolphins and pilot whales. Nor are they killers, or a danger to humans. Not in the wild, anyway. Orcas are found in every ocean on Earth, feeding on everything from fish, squid, and sharks to other marine mammals such as seals, sea lions, and whales. Adult orcas can reach lengths of 18 to 26 feet long and weigh up to 12,000 pounds or more. A mature male's dorsal fin can grow to a towering 6 feet tall. In the wild, their average lifespan is 35 to 50 years, with several individuals living to an estimated 80 to 100 years old. In fact, the world's oldest known wild orca, Granny, was thought to be around 100 years old at the time of her passing. Granny, like Lolita, was a member of the southern resident killer whale population who inhabit the coastal waters of British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. There are 3 southern resident pods, all of them fish eaters, living off Chinook salmon year-round. They're matriarchal societies, with all orcas born staying with their mothers and immediate family for life. They have a unique dialect of whistles and calls, and southern residents are actually known to be more vocal and chatty than other orca ecotypes found around the world. But on August 8th, 1970, their cheerful chatter turned to panic cries. They were being hunted. Explosives were lobbed into the sea around them. Disoriented by the deafening blasts, Lolita and her family tried to outswim the speedboats bearing down on them. In an attempt to save their young and give them a chance to escape, the mature whales split from the group, hoping to distract the spotter planes, who were chasing them from above. But the decoys were unsuccessful. The whale hunters, Ted Griffin and Don Goldsberry, directed the violent chaos. This wasn't their first time abducting orcas. Exhausted and terrified, Lolita, her family, and 80 other southern resident killer whales were forced into Penn Cove. Panic churned the water's surface, rocking the boats of the hunters, who now had the whales trapped within their nets. As calls rang out informing aquariums and entertainment parks around the world that there were whales for sale, the piercing shrieks of the entangled orcas reverberated through the inlet, haunting townsfolk watching helplessly from shore. An infant orca, isolated among the havoc, was run aground, then kidnapped by Griffin and Goldsberry's team. One mother drowned, desperately trying to save her child. 4 more youngsters were killed during the assault, charging the nets, drowning, frantically trying to reach their mothers. Under the cover of darkness, under the command of Griffin and Goldsberry, John Crow and the other divers were ordered to secretly dispose of the dead bodies. They were told to slice open their middles, fill them with rocks, tie anchors to their tails, and sink them out at sea. And so they did. The gruesome discovery being found out about months later, when their bodies mysteriously washed ashore.
So I wasn't going out and put up a big billboard. I killed X amount of animals. I did it, and that was it. It was just that simple.
Over the course of 10 tumultuous days, 5 whales were killed. Countless orca families were left terrorized and torn apart forever. Lolita, around 6 years old at the time, and 6 other youngsters, condemned by the whale hunters to a life in captivity, were dragged into the shallows. Their surviving family members, now unrestrained, followed close behind, calling out to them, lifting themselves out of the water trying to catch glimpses of their family one last time. Lolita was the last to be hoisted from the water, only to be set down again for a brief stint at a holding cell in Seattle. Innocent, she awaited her fate. It was at this facility that she was assigned the name Tokate, purchased for $20,000, and sentenced to a life of imprisonment at the Miami Seaquarium, where she still remains enslaved to this day. Just a few years later, in 1972, the Marine Mammal Protection Act was enacted, prohibiting the taking of marine mammals without specific authorization. No permits have been issued for the taking of wild orca since 1989. In 2005, the southern resident killer whales were designated as endangered under the Federal Endangered Species Act. They are one of the most critically endangered marine mammals in the United States. Sadly, the southern residents have never recovered. Their population was decimated. They lost approximately 40% of their individuals, most of which were young and of breeding age, to capture by marine parks such as the Miami Seaquarium and SeaWorld during the 1960s and 1970s.
I care more about these animals than all environmentalists put together. I think my ex-partner and myself have done more for these animals than all environmental groups put together. We've showed the public what they are like. They're beautiful animals.
Located in Miami, Florida, and founded in 1955, the Miami Seaquarium is one of the oldest marine animal display parks in the United States. The popular TV show Flipper was filmed there in the 1960s. Over 500,000 people pay to visit the facility every year. Its lease payments and taxes make it the third largest contributor to Miami-Dade County's revenue. Tokate arrived at the Miami Seaquarium in September of 1970, over a month after being stolen from her home waters. She was placed into a tiny, barren tank that offered no shade or protection from the brutal Florida sun. It was here that her captor, Arthur Hertz, gave her the stage name Lolita, after the heroine in Vladimir Nabokov's novel with the same name. In the book, the protagonist is obsessed with his 12-year-old stepdaughter, Dolores. He privately calls her by the nickname Lolita, eventually grooming, bribing, and molesting her after a cross-country road trip. Instead of swimming free, roaming the expanse of the ocean with her pod, she was to share her new confines, called the Whale Bowl, with a fellow prisoner, another southern resident killer whale captured 2 years prior. His name was Hugo. Before Lolita's arrival to the Miami Seaquarium, Hugo was kept in a tank called the Celebrity Bowl, a tank so small that when being fed, his head would be up out of the water while his tail crumpled against the floor below. Initially housed separately, the two orcas would call out to each other from their isolation. The decision was eventually made to introduce them, and fortunately, they got along. So much so that even during performances, they would mate. As far as we know, Lolita never became pregnant from their courtship. But Hugo wasn't doing well in captivity. He bit, bumped, and acted aggressively toward his trainers. He was even violent toward himself. Hugo was known to self-harm by ramming his head into the walls of his tank. Once, he broke through a viewing window and nearly severed the tip of his rostrum. Then, on March 4th, 1980, after ramming his head repeatedly against his tank, Hugo died. His official cause of death was ruled a brain aneurysm. Lolita has been without the company of another orca since Hugo's death. Somehow, even after experiencing the loss of her freedom, and then the death of her friend and tankmate of 10 years, Lolita is known as a sweet soul, some of her trainers even referring to her as a best friend. She's incredibly intelligent. Lolita remembers signals from former trainers of decades past, and still sings the unique song of her pod.
She calls out in the night. That tells us that she has vivid memories. She may not know she's 3,000 miles away. The last she saw, she was at the Seattle waterfront and then, put into a box. And she may not know, the distance, and she may think maybe her family is out there. She's near the ocean, so she may hear the waves and think, well, her family may come by someday, sometime, and if she calls, maybe they'll come.
She's also known to make adjustments during performances to accommodate the mistakes of her trainers. Unable to swim 50-plus miles a day with her pod, Lolita takes it upon herself to exercise by swimming endless laps around the edge of her confines, creating a mini tidal wave and riding the surf the best she can. She performs 2 shows a day, every day, earning the Miami Seaquarium over an estimated $160 million in a multi-billion-dollar industry. She seems to be in decent health, good spirits, and faring well, unlike many of her fellow captive orcas. Aggression toward people and attacks on trainers by captive orcas are a common occurrence. To date, 4 humans have been killed by captive orcas. When I started writing the script for this video, on the 51st anniversary of Lolita's capture and imprisonment, August 8th, 2021, there were 59 orcas currently alive and held captive around the world. As of today, less than 2 weeks later, there are only 57. 2 captive-born orcas have been killed in captivity in 12 days. On August 10th, 2021, Ula, only 2 years old, died from an intestinal issue at Laurel Park in Spain. Just 9 days later, Amaya, only 6 years old, the same age Lolita was at the time of her capture, was killed at SeaWorld San Diego. Her cause of death has not yet been made public. So now, of the 57 orcas currently alive and held captive around the world, 27 were captured from the wild. In total, 139 of the 166 wild-caught orcas have been killed in captivity. Of the 47 southern resident killer whales captured and put on display, only 1 survives to this day, Lolita. In 1995, Jerry Powers, a Miami Beach media mogul and socialite, met with Lolita's captor, Arthur Hertz, CEO of the company that owned the Miami Seaquarium. Jerry Powers offered Arthur Hertz $1 million for Lolita's release. He also suggested making a movie about her release, as well as other promotional ideas, but Hertz was unresponsive. Hertz later stated that it's not even up for discussion. Lolita's family is here at the Miami Seaquarium. That same year, at the Association of Zoos and Aquariums annual meeting in Seattle, marine biologist Ken Balcombe of the Center for Whale Research presented a comprehensive retirement plan for Lolita. The goal was to reach a sensible business agreement with the Miami Seaquarium that would allow Lolita to retire from show business and live out the remaining years of her life in a natural setting. That natural setting being a large netted sea pen, safely tucked into a cove along the coast of her home waters, the Salish Sea. Here, Lolita would have 100 acres to swim, play, and explore her home once more. She'd have the space to breach, not under human command, but at her own volition. She could deep dive to depths of 60 feet if she wanted to. Lolita would be given autonomy and never be forced to perform tricks for dead fish ever again. Lolita could once again use her echolocation, a sense she's been deprived of while trapped in a static concrete tank. She could use echolocation to explore the natural contours of the bay and the enriching textures of the sea floor. She could feel the ebb and flow of her home waters and hear the rhythm of the ocean once again. All of this, of course, under careful watch and supervision by a team of devoted human caretakers. In cooperation with the people Lolita knows best, including her trainers and her veterinarians, her team would help her acclimate to a life in a seaside sanctuary with the utmost care and attention. They'd be there to support her at all times and monitor her health and well-being 24/7, 365, as she returned to life outside of a concrete tank and experienced some freedom once again. In 1996, Dateline NBC went to Miami and played Lolita a recording of whale calls from her family pod.
She came closer. Is she curious about sounds that are different, or are they familiar? Are we watching Lolita remember her past?
If she were retired to a seaside sanctuary in her home waters, she'd have the chance to hear her family in person and not just through a cassette tape. In 2012, the Washington Transportation Commission named one of their 2 new state ferries Tokate in honor of Lolita and the name she was initially given following her capture. Tokate is a Chinook greeting, meaning nice day, pretty colors. Also in 2012, the Animal Legal Defense Fund filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Agriculture in federal court. The lawsuit argued that Lolita's tank does not meet size requirements set forth by the Animal Welfare Act, that this violation should prevent the Miami Seaquarium from renewing their exhibitor's license. A tank for an orca of Lolita's size is required to have a minimum horizontal dimension of 48 feet. Lolita's enclosure, essentially 2 connected pools, has a minimum horizontal dimension of only 35 feet. In 2014, the court found that while Congress has established standards and procedures to issue an exhibitor's license, it has left the agency to determine standards and procedures for the license renewal process, and that the USDA's renewal process was legally permissible. Case closed. In 2017, the USDA Office of Inspector General agreed that her tank is in fact too small. On September 10, 2017, Hurricane Irma made landfall in Florida. Devastating winds of 80 to 220 miles per hour battered the coast. As thousands of Floridians boarded up their homes and fled to safety in shelters, Lolita was left confined to her barren tank, seemingly abandoned and exposed to the elements. Dog and cat owners in nearby Palm Beach County faced prosecution if their pets were left outside during the storm. Unfortunately, Lolita wasn't offered any similar justice. A former SeaWorld trainer, Dr. Jeffrey Ventry, said Lolita should have been moved to SeaWorld, which he described as a bunker compared to the Miami Seaquarium. In the aftermath, 11 animals lost their lives at the Miami Seaquarium during Hurricane Irma. 9 unnamed Nile crocodiles and 2 bottlenose dolphins, 31-year-old Noel and his 14-year-old daughter, Rio, were killed. Also in 2017, the Lummi Nation, Washington's 3rd largest tribe, passed a motion to bring Lolita home. The Lummi people have a deep connection with orcas. Their word for them, Quahamichtan, means our relatives below the waves. The Lummi people are one of the original inhabitants of Washington State's northern coastal region, and view the southern resident killer whales as family members, whose history, experiences, and fate are beautifully interconnected with their own. Lolita's violent capture and prolonged holding at the Miami Seaquarium has been compared to the federal government's efforts to assimilate Native American children in church-run boarding schools. In 2018, the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, a nonprofit organization representing 57 Northwest tribal governments, supported a resolution that called for the release and return of Lolita to her native waters, the Salish Sea. In 2019, the Lummi Nation gifted Lolita the name Skaulichoktanut, meaning female from Skaulichok, which was an ancient village site near what's now called Penn Cove, the place of Lolita's abduction. It is said that no southern resident killer whale has ever returned to Penn Cove since. So here we are, 51 years later. It's been 18,644 days since Tokate, Lolita Skaulichoktanut, was hunted down, ripped from her family, and stolen from the Salish Sea. She committed no crime, but was imprisoned anyway. Lolita's freedom was violently taken from her, so that our human curiosity could be satisfied. She's entertained us for decades, performing shows twice daily, about 37,288 times, to bring smiles to the faces of the happy human families seated around her in the stands, in excitement and wonder. We spend our day at the Miami Seaquarium making new memories together with family and friends at the expense of someone who has been robbed of those exact things. While we get to head home after a day of fun at the Miami Seaquarium and return to our lives and loved ones, Lolita remains, alone, in her tank, day after day, decade after decade. Think of everything you've done in the past 10 years. Think of all the experiences you've had, the places you've been in the last 20. Think of all the people you've met, fell in love with, and the adventures you've been on together over the decades. Maybe you've traveled the world. Maybe you've grown your family. Maybe you've moved houses several times, but you've always known where your home is. Like the tides, hundreds of thousands of us have come and gone, watching Lolita perform, but the tides are changing. Thanks to the relentless efforts of countless scientists, journalists, filmmakers, organizations, protesters, the Lummi Nation, and everyday people like you and me, global opinion about the keeping of dolphins and whales in captivity is changing. We know that while these amusement parks operate under the guise of education, that forcing orcas to dance to pop music, leap on command, and carry human trainers on their backs is not education at all. We know that the true conservation and the study of orcas in their natural habitat is more ethical than captivity. That it's more beneficial to science to study wild orca populations instead of captive individuals to deepen our understanding of this magnificent species. The naysayers refuse to even discuss the possibility of Lolita's retirement, saying that her place is with them, her family, at the Miami Seaquarium. First of all, we know that Lolita's real family are the southern resident killer whales of the Salish Sea, and that her mother, believed to be Ocean Sun, is still alive and swimming free at over 90 years of age. Second, who abandons their family during a hurricane? And who sells their family members over and over again? The Miami Seaquarium actually just changed hands again. On August 17th, 2021, the Mexican-based The Dolphin Company purchased the park for an undisclosed amount. Lolita is nothing more than a business asset, helping whatever company owns her at the time to generate profit for them and meet their bottom line. Even if her caretakers love Lolita for more than the money she makes them, they still leave her time and time again. Stuck in her tank, Lolita's watched helplessly for decades as the people who claim to love her, that consider Lolita their best friend, their family member, have left her one by one. A revolving door of caretakers, veterinarians, and trainers, all outgrowing the Miami Seaquarium and abandoning Lolita as they pursue new careers, passions, and set out to live their lives beyond the confines of the Miami Seaquarium. And does loving someone justify their capture or their confinement? The naysayers also point out that the release of the Free Willy star, Keiko, was a failure, but it wasn't. Before his rehabilitation and release, Keiko was in terrible health and living in deplorable conditions, and a poor candidate for release. Even still, he was rescued, rehabilitated, and released to live over 7 years without being exploited for profit. He thrived. He grew in length, gained over 2,000 pounds, learned to catch live fish, and got to swim in his home waters once again. He experienced freedom up until the very end. If Lolita's captors consider Keiko's retirement from show business a failure, what would they call captivity? Over 170 orcas have been killed in captivity. That's not even counting the 30 stillborn and miscarried orca calves that we know about. 200 orca deaths at the hands of captors is considered a success? The naysayers also proclaim that Lolita will die if she's retired and moved to a seaside sanctuary. But captive whale and dolphin transports are routine in the industry. And speaking of industry, this is a big one. The people declaring that her retirement to seaside sanctuary would be a failure directly profit off Lolita remaining enslaved. Fortunately, we have a say. By choosing to boycott animal attractions that exploit sentient beings for profit, we can tell places like the Miami Seaquarium that their unethical business will not be tolerated, nor will it be profitable. Lolita deserves retirement. She deserves autonomy. She deserves to experience the enriching world of the ocean once again. She deserves a safe seaside sanctuary and our utmost care and attention. Lolita deserves to be returned to her home, to the Salish Sea, to her family. Let's give that to her.
Yeah.